Welcome to Innovation and Leadership. This week on the show, we've got David Covey.
And the great thing about this is, a lot of times people beat themselves up over mistakes that they make. And if you can reframe it and say, those weren't mistakes, though they kind of were a little bit, but they're really traps. You reframe them in the idea that these are traps.
This is another episode of our Innovation and Leadership series where we interview pro athletes, world-class musicians, CEOs, Hollywood filmmakers, and a wide variety of other high achievers. Also, I want to talk to you about one of our show's sponsors. I met these guys back on episode 6. CEO Zach Smith was telling me all about starting a skateboard company and how much he hated doing the bookkeeping for a skateboard shop, and how he really got led to start this business, Bookly, that's a hybrid combining bookkeeping software and human services. And I'll tell you why I let him become a sponsor. It's because I use their service now. I don't love paying $50 an hour for bookkeepers to do stuff that I know software could do way, way cheaper. But I don't love bookkeeping at all. So I want a real live human who knows what they're talking about to help me with the stuff I don't understand. Probably the straw that broke the camel's back for me, though, the thing that put me over the top was that they could do my taxes and payroll also. So totally suggest checking them out. Go to their website, bookly.co, and check out their flat rates. I've been super happy with them. So now on to today's episode. David, thanks for making time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So a lot of people will recognize your last name. Your dad's a pretty famous guy. But tell us a little bit about SMCOV before we go on to that.
Yeah, so SMCOV is a company that was started by my business partner, whose name is Stefan Mardiks. He's the SM, and I'm the COV of SMCOV. And we started this about 7 years ago. We were both at Franklin Covey. I was there for about 16 years and Stefan for about 9. And we both decided that we wanted to venture out on our own and set up our own business. I've always wanted to have my own business at some point in my career, and I decided to break out when I was 44. So, and I discovered once I broke out, I love being an entrepreneur. It's like I could never go work for the man anymore.
Well, and do you mind sharing that story we were talking about before the episode started about, your dad, and on the rare chance that somebody doesn't know who your dad is, you want to cover just a little bit of that background and then the big change at 50 and...
Yeah, sure. So, what gave me some courage to do this when I was, 44 years old, I was married. I have 7 kids. So, it's not exactly a, kind of a career move that most people would do. I was the chief operating officer at Franklin Covey. So, I had a really good job. I was making really good money. But what gave me courage to kind of break out and set up my own business was my father, Stephen Covey, who wrote this, people know him for the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He wrote the 7 Habits when he was 57 years old, actually. And he was a professor for 25 years before he decided to break out. And my mom and my dad and he had 9 kids, so I'm one of 9 kids. So he broke out when he was 50 years old from the comfortable world of academia. Had been a professor for 25 years. He had a good consulting business on the side that was doing really well. And he gave it all up to set up Covey Leadership Center, which then later became Franklin Covey. And for, the first 10 years or so, he had to carry the company, financially. And, I remember one point when I was married in 1989, he came to me and said, well, do you think you have a place for Mom and I, if things don't work out for the company? And because he had his home and all of his possessions, mortgaged against, the company. And if the company didn't succeed, he would have lost everything. So that example growing up gave me a lot of courage that, I could break out, at a middle age, 44 years old to set up this business with Stefan.
Yeah. Well, and let's talk about your 16 years at Franklin Covey, because, you guys posted some pretty big numbers in leading this initiative of going international. Can you talk about that for just a minute?
Yeah, you bet. So, the Franklin Covey mainly became successful through the 7 Habits book and training program. The training program has sold, over $1 billion in sales, over time, and which is pretty remarkable for a training course, to sell over $1 billion. But I was, involved in both U.S. roles and international roles. But really, I think where my biggest contributions were at Franklin Covey was to help them go global, go internationally. And they had direct offices and licensing offices as well. So I helped them do that. And we went from, basically nobody to, $100 million, $120 million business. And so I was proud to be part of that. Now I had a, blockbuster book and a blockbuster program, so that's required to, to really kind of grow in that way. But I learned a lot about licensing and how to grow an international business. And that's what spawned SMCOV. So we help other training companies now go global with their brand. And companies like Liz Wiseman's Multipliers or David Allen's Getting Things Done, programs like that, a lot of people would be familiar with. And we also do a lot of consulting with a lot of the training big boys like Center for Creative Leadership or Ken Blanchard Companies and Vital Smarts and American Management Association. So it's been great. I haven't looked back at all, and I've had moments of I'd say crisis in terms of not being able to pay myself any money for a little while. So that's been a little hard and difficult, but I wouldn't trade it for the world.
That's awesome. Good friend of ours, former guest on the show, Treon Muller, I believe worked with you back at the...
of course. Yeah, Treon is awesome.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about this new book, Trap Tales.
Yeah.
You lead, and then I got a bunch of questions.
Yeah, so Trap Tales is about outsmarting the 7 hidden obstacles to success. And what Stefan and I, so we're content junkies, right? So we love content, and we have about 20 brands that we represent, and we consult with about 20 different companies. So we love content. We read tons of books. I personally have probably been through 200 training programs, in my time. So just because I'm in this industry and in this business. So we noticed one area that we thought, that there was a gap in terms of content, and that was this whole idea about traps. And we started creating some new terminology around that, like trapology. Trapology is the study of traps. And trapologist is somebody who's an expert at spotting and staying out of traps. And what we observed is that there were there's a lot of traps that people fall into. But, of course, we had to list it to the 7 most common and modern traps, right? You can't be a Covey and write a book and not have 7. You can't have like the 5 traps or the 9 traps, right? It's got to be 7, the magical number. In fact, I have 7 kids, and, I was thinking about maybe only having 6. And my father said, well, if you have 6 kids, I don't know if you can work at the 7 Habits Company. You're just going to have to find employment elsewhere. So, yeah, I had to convince my wife we had to have 7 kids. Anyway, so 7 traps. And we started off with a list, Jess, about we had maybe 30. And we had to whittle it down to the 7 most common and modern traps that you would find not only in the United States, but anywhere in the world. And so that's what it's about. It's the 7 most common and modern traps that people fall into. And we started writing the book, and after about 3 weeks, we wrote it, like a regular self-help book. And we were both ready to throw up. It was just like, I can't stand my book, and I'm writing it. And so we decided that we wanted to make it into a story. So, because a lot of the self-help books, give you a list of 85 things you need to do, and it's through 400 pages long, and it's too long. And so we made our book into a story, and it's a story about a middle-aged man named Alex and his wife Kim, and they have 2 kids, Laura and Michael, and they live in Los Angeles. And Alex is going through all kinds of problems, right? And he's falling into all these traps in his marriage and with his his kids and his finances and all these other things. And that's so we teach the 7 traps through this story.
Our sponsor for this episode of Innovation and Leadership is Skillshare. If you're not familiar with them, they're an online learning platform with over 18,000 classes on business and marketing and entrepreneurship and technology and lots of other classes too, illustration, other things I'm interested in. They've given us a special offer where, for the listeners of our show, you can get 2 months for just 99 cents, where you can see all these 18,000 classes, unlimited access. It's Skillshare.com/leader. And I think what I like about them most is their high quality classes that are from high credibility instructors, you know, content marketing right from Contently, or the one I took was last was email marketing right from MailChimp, where, you know, these are folks who are obviously seeing millions of other people's email marketing campaigns go out, so they really are kind of a high credibility source of information. So again, it's Skillshare.com/leader, 99 cents for complete access to all their courses for the next 2 months. One last time, Skillshare.com/leader. Thanks. Yeah. Well, you know, for me, I think right off the bat, I liked it when it got described as, hey, look at the master chess players who invent a trap for the opponent to fall into, right? And there's some of those that once you've made your moves, you're really not going to get back out of them.
Yeah.
And so when you go through and your lessons on debt and these kind of things, I mean, it is a pattern that you see. Man, it becomes like bondage. If you've already made those moves, sometimes you can't just unmake them some easy way, right?
It's a big deal, you know. And you mentioned debt, so that's the money trap. That's trap number 2. But yeah, debt is a big deal, and it is like bondage. It feels like quicksand. It's so hard to get out of, and really. You know, if you're a younger person, or you're just kind of starting your life, or you just graduated, or you're just starting your new career, decide now that you're going to be a person that's going to make interest rather than a person that pays interest. And I think that I'm 50, so for the first 25 years of my professional career, I've been a person that's probably paid more interest than made interest. And I know what it's like to be in debt. And Jess, in every one of the traps, we talk about the conventional approach that most people are aware of, or or most people would recommend. You know, if you're in debt, this is what you do. And what we found is the conventional approach does not always work all the time. Albert Einstein says the problems that we face can't possibly be solved at the same level of thinking we were at when we created them. So we need a whole new level of thinking to kind of get out of a lot of these modern traps that we're in. So, for example, in the debt trap, what we recommend, because my wife and I tried budgeting, and it didn't work for us. Now, I know that that's the conventional approach. Budget, be disciplined, exercise restraint. We got into fights, and we had heated discussions about wants and needs, and we were accusing each other of why are you spending that and why are you spending that, and it felt monotonous and it was difficult. And I'm not against budgeting. I there's nothing wrong with it. I just don't think it's the most effective way in getting out of debt. So we actually created a paper debt snake. So it's the idea of gamify, your debt. So we created this paper debt snake. We got the kids involved, and we had $90,000 of credit card debt. And we had been fighting, trying budgeting for 2 years with no success.
So this is basically just your story in the book.
This is my story, yeah.
Okay.
And a lot of the stories in the book are my stories, and some of them are not. So my wife sometimes says, she sometimes calls me the old Alex and the new Alex. You'll see this transformation of Alex in the book, but yes. So this is actually what was our story, and so we gamified it, and our kids were so excited about it. They'd say stuff like, I want to get that Lego, but I'm not going to, Dad, because I don't want to add any more debt to that lousy snake. And our kids would, love to cut the snake up. It's the time, when, the internet wasn't so prevalent and so forth, or online stuff, but they'd wait for the statements to arrive in the mail, and they'd say, okay, oh, wow, we can cut off another $2,000. And they would be the ones that insisted on cutting off the snake. And then after that, so we eliminated $90,000 of credit card debt in 18 months. So it was small feat, I'd say a major feat for us. And then after that, we created this green tree with the 4 branches. And that's what we recommend in the book is, after you've eliminated your debt, you're used to putting all that money to debt. Now put it to the four branches, which is your savings, your retirement, your kids' education funds, if you have kids, and your investments. And we started to create the green tree, after and had all that. I have 7 kids. You know how expensive it is for college for 7 kids? It's outrageous. So, I saved about, my wife and I saved about $250,000 in 529 money, which is, education funds for kids you can use for tuition and books and room and board and stuff. And that's sustained us. So far, we've had 2 graduates, and 2 of our kids are in college now, and we've got 3 more at home. So we keep saving for that. But there's no way I could have done that had we not got out of debt. And we couldn't get out of debt the normal, conventional way of budgeting. Just didn't work for us.
Yeah. Well, I was really happy to see your reference to Alan Deutschman's book referenced in there, and Change or Die. And to me, I feel like you have kind of baked in an extra principle there. One of my favorite things from that book is this idea of the not doing it alone.
Yes.
Where he talks about like creating the social environment that's going to assist you along the way.
Yeah.
And this idea of like, if this is something that the whole family wants to be a part of, and like you said, it's a game and there's something in it for the kids, there's some sort of novelty for accomplishment.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Doesn't it lower the willpower requirement?
Totally. And that's what is way overrated, is willpower. And think about it. New Year's resolutions, right? How many set New Year's resolution? I used to set like 10 things, that I was going to do. And by February, I was just like, I don't know if I could remember one of them. Even if I wrote them down, I just wasn't doing it. It was just too many things. And I think we put too much emphasis on willpower and having the willpower. And see, that's the problem with budgeting. So the funny thing is that during a paper debt snake, we were doing the right kind of activities that we would be doing if we were budgeting.
Yeah.
But it was not monotonous,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about this of, the training world is changing. There's the digital revolution. There's issues with internationalization and all sorts of stuff, right? For you, when you have this idea, you've got the personal experience, you feel like, this is going to worked for us, right? You got some faith in it. As you're thinking about mapping out the business of this, and you're like, okay, we need the book, then we need XXX. Like, in your mind, being part of, arguably one of the most successful training companies that's existed, and then seeing the international side, not just stuff here at home.
Yep.
What kind of thoughts are going through your mind as you're architecting? How do we go from something that worked to my family to something that can work for a lot of people?
Yeah, like with Trap Tales, you mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, it's tough to come up with original content. I would just say that. And I think my father's a genius, and I think what he's come up with is, so insightful, that you could just make a living just, off of his stuff. But I felt like, I've always wanted to be, independent and provide my own contribution, to what my father has done and what other great people have done, in the training world. And so, Stefan, my business partner, he's a great intellectual thinker. He's just, he actually came up with the whole idea of trapology and trapologists. That's really his brainchild. And for us, we see a lot of people who are really struggling and having difficulties in their life. And if you can have a framework to think through your problems, and the great thing about this is, a lot of times people beat themselves up over mistakes that they make. And if you can reframe it and say, those weren't mistakes, though they kind of were a little bit, but they're really traps. You reframe them in the idea that these are traps. And it's true. I had a credit card application come for my 11-year-old son in the mail. I mean, come on, are you kidding? They're going to try to, they try to get my 11-year-old son to sign up for a credit card. Now, obviously, I bet if they could figure it out, they'd make it happen. But there are these major traps that exist in life and work, and we've fallen into them, and we need a way to how to get out of them, and we need to also, even better, a way to how to avoid them in the future. Give people a roadmap, and help and give them a guide and some instructions on what they can do to avoid falling in these traps in the future. And I think that a lot of people are frustrated because they're not achieving their life's goals or their plans, or their life didn't happen the way that they thought it was going to, or their career is not as successful as they thought. And a lot of people think that they're too old. They think, well, I can't do it now. How can I change at 45 or 50 or 60? And it's not true. The main message of Trap Tales is this message of hope. We can change the trajectory of our life at any time and at any point in our life.
Well, and I think, your dad, after a career as a professor, which you're not known for risk-taking entrepreneurs, right? You've got this great family legacy that's going great for 16 years, building big international business, deciding to make that move. It's nice when you can speak from experience and having that example set, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And Trap Tales is a work in process. It's just because my name is Covey, my last name is Covey, doesn't make the Trap Tales book successful. I hope it will be successful. I hope people will like reading it and get a lot of wisdom from it. But there's a lot of work that we need to do it. I'm setting up a lot of keynote speeches, to do around Trap Tales. It's more of there's some business aspect to it, but there's a lot of consumer aspect to it. Like personal finance and relationships and purpose. Kind of what the purpose of life is about, which is some of the traps. So there's kind of some more of that consumer side. So we're going to create kind of a B2C offering. We're thinking about even creating a game, like Trapology or a Trapologist, and give people a kind of a game around that. I love what Robert Kiyosaki did, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, in the cash flow game. Many people have maybe used that before. Yeah, it's awesome. Well, and on it, not only his book, but the whole cash flow game, it teaches, that you're going to basically be in the rat race, unless you learn to make some investments and be smart about doing something.
Honestly, that is probably, so we bought that board game, right?
Yeah.
I had a mentor he was starting me off on the basics before working up, and that's one of the ones. And my wife and I decided a number of years ago, maybe a decade ago, like, we're going to drive what we can pay cash for. Yep. And sometimes that's been really, really nice vehicles, and it's gone from those to a $1,500 minivan.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And it's like, anyways, we've really enjoyed it. Even though it's been like slightly embarrassing sometimes when all your friends have, when you don't fit in the neighborhood, because you're making the choice that you think is the right choice. Right. There's like some uncomfortableness, but there's also like this inner I'm winning a game kind of aspect of it too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I was playing the cash flow game with my kids, and my son, my 11-year-old son, was, he kept getting these. They have these doodads, where you have to like take on another kid, or or make a major purchase. He goes, God, I'm a plumber, and I got that 8. I don't think it was 8 kids, but it's like I got like 6 kids now, and then we go out and buy a big screen TV. I mean, what's going on, Dad? I mean, I can't stand it.
That's hilarious.
But that's it's simulating life, and that's what we tried to do with Trap Tales too.
That's great. Well, let's talk about, if people want to get a hold of this, traptales.com or SMCOV.com is the company website. Amazon.com, that's where I went and bought my Kindle copy. Yeah. By the way, thank you for the signed copy.
Oh, you bet. My pleasure.
I unfortunately do not sit and read, so I did text to voice and had robot voice off my iPhone read it to me.
I love it.
But you've got the audiobook coming.
The Audible, I did 3 days of recording just a couple of weeks ago, and so Audible will be coming out soon for Trap Tales. And the book is published by Wiley, one of the largest publishers in the U.S. So you could buy it from Wiley, you can buy it from Amazon if you're like me, and it's in some of the major bookstores, like Barnes and Noble and so forth. But so it's easy to get for anybody who wants to pick up a copy.
That's great. Well, this is the end of part 1. Everybody tune into part 2. We're going to be asking David more about the adventure of his life here. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jess.
Well, that's it for the episode. One other thing I wanted to tell you about, if you'll remember the guys from Convoy in episodes back, Ken Free and Trent Mano, I went on one of their CEO trips to New York, and I met a guy named Brent Thompson, very successful entrepreneur. He was former CEO of Jive Communications, big company now, I think $300 or $400 million. Anyways, he started a new company called blipbillboards.com. I'm super stoked they're a sponsor now. But I remember a year and some ago when I met him, I thought it was genius. Instead of having to buy 6 months or a year's worth of billboard for thousands of dollars, you can buy 8 seconds at a time for like 10 or 20 cents. You pick what billboard you want it on, what time of day you want it to run, and it just puts so much power in the hands of marketers and CEOs who want to try something and see if it works. You can buy as many or as few as you want, change it as many times as you want. I think now our podcast is being advertised on billboards in like 18 different states because we have these guys as sponsors. We're pretty excited about it. Hope you check out blipbillboards.com. Thanks.